I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Trump's turn. The House passed it.
And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The Senate passed it. Now it is up to the president to sign the bill releasing the Epstein Files. Ominous warning.
This is a new era of threat. It demands a new era for defense.
The UK Defense Secretary sounds the alarm after a Russian spy ship points lasers at RAF pilots tracking it. Comey in court. Lawyers say the case against the former FBI director should be dismissed. Plus, the Pope, the governor of Illinois, arrives at the Vatican bearing gifts from the pontiff's hometown. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Margaret of Scotland. We begin tonight with news that the Army Secretary is now in Kyiv for high-level meetings to restart peace talks. According to an official statement, Secretary Driscoll and his team arrived this morning in Kyiv on behalf of the administration on a fact-finding mission to meet with Ukrainian officials and discuss efforts to end the war. It comes after the meeting between the presidents of Turkey and Ukraine. Earlier today, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey is ready to discuss proposals with Moscow that could accelerate the ceasefire. He noted it is important for the United States to be involved in the process. A senior Ukrainian official told Reuters that Kyiv received signals about a set of U.S. proposals that Washington has already discussed with Russia without Ukrainian involvement. This comes as the search and rescue efforts continue in the Ukrainian city of Ternopil after a massive overnight drone and missile barrage. At least 25 people are confirmed dead and 73 others injured. Joining us to discuss this is former ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Veronica. Good to be here.
So Army Secretary Dan Driscoll has been designated as special representative to help kickstart peace process talks with Russia. We learned he and a delegation are now in Kyiv. What does that signal to you?
Well, the main signal is that that there's a process underway, that people are now talking about how to end this war. Donald Trump has been talking about how to end this war for over a year. And there have been fits and starts. But now it seems that there's a serious effort being made to end this war, to stop the killing.
President Zelensky met with Turkish President Erdogan. What role could Turkey play in facilitating or pressuring for peace?
Turkey has facilitated discussions before. In the beginning, they were able to get the Russians and the Ukrainians to sit down. The Russians, of course, were not willing to come to the table with any meaningful proposals. But the Ukrainians have been there every time. The Turks have invited President Zelensky to come to Istanbul. He came. President Trump actually was in the area, but President Putin said no. So that's been the pattern. But the Turks do have the ability to talk to the Russians, and they are in good terms with the Ukrainians, as you've just indicated, so they can play a role.
There are reports that Russia is holding secret talks with the Trump administration over ending the war in Ukraine, but the Kremlin has denied that. You have a special perspective on this. What more do we know, and could talks be successful now?
Well, we know that there have been conversations between Russians and Americans. High-profile discussion between President Putin and President Trump back in Anchorage a month or two ago. So we know that there have been conversations. What we don't know is what the discussions are. We also know, as you just reported, that there's an American delegation there talking with the Ukrainians about how to end this war. So there's a lot of conversations going on. That's the right thing. The right thing to do is to have these conversations with the Russians and the Ukrainians.
Russia and Ukraine have been far apart on their demands. What are some of the key differences in the conditions each country wants in order to achieve a permanent peace deal?
It's very clear, Veronica. It's very clear. The Ukrainians want to live. They want to exist. They want to be a European country. And the Russians don't want that to happen. They don't want Ukraine to live or to exist or to be a European country. The Russians want to, and President Putin has been upfront about this. He has said he wants to eliminate Ukraine. That's not really a country. So it makes it very difficult to see how there can be overlap in those two things. So President Putin is going to have to come back a long way on his goals, or he's not really serious about the ceasefire.
Oil sanctions are supposed to come into effect on Friday. Will that move the needle?
It should. It's one step that can help put pressure on Putin. And this has been a good move by the Trump administration to finally put serious sanctions on Russian oil companies. The two largest Russian oil companies have been sanctioned. Those go into effect, as you say, on Friday. That is going to reduce the flow of funds, of revenues to the Russians that they get from selling oil and gas in export. So this is one thing that has to happen in order to convince Putin to stop this war.
William Taylor, former ambassador to Ukraine, thank you so much.
Thank you, Veronica. Good to be here.
The UK is warning Moscow it is ready to handle any incursion into its territory. It comes after a Russian spy ship was detected just north of Scotland. The vessel entered the UK wider waters over the last few weeks.
That Russian action is deeply dangerous. And this is the second time this year that this ship, the Yantar, has deployed to UK waters. So my message to Russia and to Putin is this. We see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
Healy says the Russian spy ship pointed lasers at RAF pilots tracking its activity. He says the vessel is there to gather intelligence and map UK undersea cables. The Russian embassy has responded in a statement saying it was, quote, not interested in British underwater communications. Poland says it is closing the last Russian consulate in its territory in response to a railway explosion it blames on Moscow. It also says it will deploy thousands of soldiers to protect its critical infrastructure. Officials say two Ukrainian collaborating with Russia carried out the attack on a key railway used for deliveries to Ukraine. Polish leaders are calling it state terrorism and are urging the EU to restrict Russian diplomats. Moscow denies any involvement and says it would likewise limit Poland's diplomatic and consular presence in Russia. Israel launched multiple airstrikes today in southern Lebanon targeting Hezbollah infrastructure. The attack killed a Hezbollah operative and wounded several other people, including students on a bus. This incident follows a major Israeli airstrike on Tuesday night that killed 13 people in a Palestinian refugee camp. But Israel claims the target was a Hamas training compound preparing an attack. In a statement, Hamas condemned the airstrikes and denied Israel's accusation. President Donald Trump announces his administration is going to start working on Sudan. The war-torn African country is being ravaged by fighting. The president says tremendous atrocities are taking place in Sudan. It's been called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Veronica, good evening to you. President Donald Trump often mentions the wars and conflicts he's helped end or mitigate during his second term in office. Today, he brought up Sudan. He says it's become the most violent place on earth, and it's next on his list.
President Donald Trump addresses the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum held at the Kennedy Center, telling investors and tech titans America is back and open for business, while promoting the U.S.-Saudi economic partnership.
We're rewarding those who build and create, invent, and invest in the USA.
The president also discussed war, saying he's already settled 8 conflicts, and now the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia convinced him to start working on Sudan.
It was not on my charts to be involved in that. I thought it was just something that was crazy and out of control. But I just see how important that is to you and to a lot of your friends in the room. Sudan, and we're going to start working in Sudan.
The civil war pits the Sudanese armed forces against the paramilitary rapid support forces. Fighting has killed over 40,000 people and may be far worse. In addition, 14 million people displaced. President Trump telling attendees,
and he said, sir, you're talking about a lot of wars, but there's a place on earth called Sudan, and it's horrible what's happening. And I viewed it as being just sort of a freelance, no government, no this, no that, and he explained the whole culture and the whole history, and it was very interesting to hear.
Earlier this month at the Vatican, Pope Leo renewed his appeal for a ceasefire in Sudan and the opening of humanitarian corridors while slamming violence against women and children. At today's event, President Trump also discussed a conversation he had with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the war in Ukraine.
Azerbaijan, you know what was happening there? I settled that. That was going on for many, many years. Actually, Putin called me. He said, I can't believe you got that one settled. We've been trying to settle that one for a long time. I said, don't worry about that. Just let me settle your frickin' war.
In addition, President Trump is designating Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally. He calls that a big deal. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Sign off. Finally, the release of the Epstein Files is just a signature away. And immigration crackdowns have hit Chicago and Charlotte. Now we know their next destination. Welcome back. President Trump is expected to sign a bill demanding the Justice Department release all of its files on convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. It sailed through the House with only one single vote in opposition, and the Senate wasted no time in getting it across the finish line.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate receives H.R. 4405, the Epstein Files Transparency Act from the House, the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. The bill be considered, read 3 times, and passed.
Now, the president's signature does not guarantee all of the files will be released. The legislation does contain some exceptions that are similar to the reasons Attorney General Pam Bondi initially withheld the files. Mark Little, a former senior official with the Department of Justice, joins me now to discuss. Thank you so much for your time. So first, do you think the DOJ attorneys will actually release the files, or could there be legal obstacles?
Hi, Veronica. Thanks for having me this evening. Yes, well, the fine print of the statute hasn't been really released yet, but there's been some reporting that within 30 days after the signature of the president, the Epstein files are going to have to be produced and released. But there are exceptions, and the exceptions include personal information about victims and anything jeopardizing a federal investigation. And that could be a broad list of categories that could be withheld.
Now, members from both sides. Oh, please finish.
Yeah, no, but once after 30 days and after the documents have been released, according to the legislation, the Department of Justice has to give Congress a list of the materials released and withheld. So, and that would include a full report of any redactions and a list of any government officials and politically exposed persons that are redacted. So I think there's got some teeth in it for people who suspect that maybe it's not all being released, that they'll have something to go on to fight about if they want a more transparent, if transparency is not being obtained by the Department of Justice's release.
Now, members from both sides of the aisle have been calling for these documents to be released for years. Could prior administrations have just directed the DOJ or FBI to expedite investigations or unseal records?
It's very true, Veronica. I mean, I'm a former federal prosecutor myself, and there are criminal victims' rights. Typically, there have been a number of victims out there in the news lately calling for full transparency. But I got to believe there's a lot of victims who don't want transparency or don't want themselves dragged through the mud. They've been through something that's horrible, and they may not want their names associated with it. So I think that there will be a process where maybe victims are identified by a number or some kind of redaction to their names. But both sides of the aisle, this is a very serious investigation with really serious consequences. And the victims have a lot of power here. And if you look back to the Dr. Larry Nassar, if you recall, with regard to USA Gymnastics and his abuse at Michigan State University, and there was a state court judge who held a sentencing that really dragged out, and a lot of the victims were testifying. And as that kind of process came through, I think all of the political figures involved, I think Michigan State's president had to resign, their athletic director resigned. These victims have a voice, and it's very powerful. It's going to be very difficult for anybody who's an elected official to try to ignore their demands for transparency in this case.
We're already seeing prominent figures resigning from positions over their ties and communications with Jeffrey Epstein. How far-reaching of an impact could the release of these files have, not just in Washington, D.C., but around the world?
I mean, so if you've looked at what's already been released, there are former presidents, President Clinton, Donald Trump. Larry Summers is somebody who was president of Harvard University and Secretary of Treasury previously, who recently just stepped away from public life. These things are, this Mr. Epstein, he was far-reaching and he was somebody who could really talk to a lot of influential people and did so. And so it could include a lot of very well-known people.
Mark Lytle, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Now that the government has reopened, year-end healthcare reform initiatives remain high on the to-do list for many lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Obamacare premiums are due to increase for millions, and healthcare costs in general continue to go up. The Senate Finance Committee held the first hearing since the shutdown ended to look at possible solutions, but committee leaders clashed about Obamacare and abortion.
Our healthcare system is broken. Obamacare failed to make healthcare more affordable. Premiums and out-of-pocket costs are rising for all Americans.
Republicans continue to raise additional anti-abortion restrictions that will pave the way for a de facto national abortion ban by inserting Hyde language into the tax code of America for the first time. And I want to make the point now very clearly that on our watch, on this side of the dais, that's not going to happen.
Experts disagreed on Obamacare subsidies, which run out at the end of the year, affecting about 22 million people. That's according to private estimates.
And from a fiscal perspective at the time, I was quite worried about the implications for the budgetary outlook, which were not good then and are even worse now. And to add any further additional mandatory spending to the federal budget is simply unwise at this point and must be offset at a minimum.
So how can we stop this pain from spreading and start reversing it? At this point, the only feasible option is a clean extension of the existing enhancements. The marketplaces have already built that option and have been preparing for months for the possibility of an extension.
After the Thanksgiving recess next week, discussions about potential health care policy items are expected to kick into high gear. But the tight timeline and limited legislative days left in this session make a major action this year increasingly unlikely. New challenges in the prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey after it was revealed that the full grand jury did not see the final indictment. Back in September, Comey pleaded not guilty to charges alleging he made a false statement before Congress in 2020. Comey's lawyers want the case dismissed, saying the mishandling of the case makes the final indictment invalid. No decision has been reached. Today, federal officials unveiled new charges against a former Olympic snowboard athlete for Canada who is wanted for allegedly running a drug trafficking ring.
Today, we're unsealing a new indictment, charging Wedding with 2 additional counts of witness tampering and intimidation, murder, money laundering, and drug trafficking.
The murder charge stems from Wedding's alleged involvement in the killing of a federal witness in Colombia. Investigators have been searching for Wedding for more than a year. He's believed to be in Mexico and is on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The State Department raised its reward for information that could lead to his arrest from $10 million to $15 million. The latest immigration crackdown, Operation Charlotte's Web in North Carolina, is underway. Charlotte is the latest city targeted by the Trump administration in a nationwide effort to enforce immigration laws.
Right now, the community is under threat. Since Saturday, we have received calls of increased enforcement outside of Home Depot across the city. Home Depot has the responsibility and the opportunity to stand with the community as a major gathering point. They are not neutral.
About 100 people protested the operation outside of a Home Depot store in Charlotte where federal agents were spotted. So far, the Department of Homeland Security says agents have arrested 250 illegal immigrants, including at least 44 with violent criminal records ranging from aggravated assault to known gang activity. According to documents obtained by the Associated Press, DHS is preparing to send some 250 border agents to New Orleans for a 2-month immigration crackdown operation called Swamp Sweep. It's expected to begin on December 1st and is reportedly aimed at arresting 5,000 people across southeast Louisiana and into Mississippi. Pope Leo has spoken out about the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. He stressed the need to treat people humanely.
I think every country has a right to determine who and how and when people enter. But when people are living good lives, and many of them for 10, 15, 20 years, to treat them in a way that is extremely disrespectful, to say the least. And there's been some violence, unfortunately. I think that the bishops have been very clear in what they said, and I think that I would just invite all people in the United States to listen to them.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Christian hope. The Pope shares the key to transforming our relationships and the role Christian hope has to play. Plus, get an exclusive look at the new documentary on Christ the King, produced by EWTN in Ireland. Urges the faithful to speak up for those who have no voice and to protect the environment. He also said Christian hope helps us respond to the challenges of our time.
Sul rapporto fra la risurrezione di Cristo e le sfide del mondo attuale.
At the weekly talk, the Holy Father reflected on Christ's resurrection and its impact on the challenges of today's world. He pointed out that if we allow it, Christ's act of salvation can transform all our relationships, especially those with God, other people, and creation. The Pope stressed that we must allow Christian hope to influence the ways we respond to the issues that we face and change history by protecting both people and creation. Also today, the Pope met the leader of his home state, Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker. The governor gifted the Pope a pack of Illinois brewed beer named Da Pope, created to honor the new pontiff and his Chicago roots. The governor's office said Pope Leo's message of hope, unity, and peace resonate in his state. Unlike the earthly rulers of the world, his kingship is not based on force but on humility, service, and love. The new docu-series produced by EWTN Ireland showcases the meaning of Christ the King. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Valentina Di Donato has more.
Each year, the Roman Catholic Church ends its liturgical year with a special feast dedicated to Christ the King. And this Sunday will mark 100 years of the feast. The EWTN docu-series The Kingship of Christ, produced by EWTN Ireland, explores the meaning and origins of the term kingship in sacred scripture. And this week, the world premiere was held inside of the Vatican, where ambassadors to the Holy See and journalists were present. The 4 episodes were filmed in Rome together with EWTN Vatican office and took around 6 months of production. Head of EWTN Ireland, Aidan Gallagher, spoke to EWTN News about what drove the need to produce this docu-series.
Unity with oneself, unity with one another, and unity then between nations. So that's what the Kingship of Christ really calls us to do, to have that allegiance, as a subject of the King and follow his principles of, peace, truth, and love with ourselves and with one another.
The series examines the nature of Christ's kingship, its rise to prominence in the 19th and 20th centuries, and how his reign continues to be realized in the world today. This feast day began in 1925 amidst an increasingly darkening world in turmoil after World War I. With the growth of secularism spreading throughout the world, Pope Pius XI sought to combat the darkness with an affirmation that Jesus Christ is the true King to whom we owe allegiance. Father Bernard McGuckin, who was the host of the documentary, says Christ's kingship is threefold.
He is the King of hearts, primarily, not King in any other way. So he is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. And people understand that they cannot live their lives without some sort of guidance, and they're given this marvelous guidance, and it's the kingship of Christ.
In his encyclical Quas Primas, establishing the Feast of Christ the King, Pope Pius XI says human beings respond to Christ's kingship by allowing him to rule in our minds, wills, hearts, and bodies. And through that, we can combat the violence and dangers of secular ideologies like fascism and communism. To watch the 4-part docu-series, you can go to this link at www.ewtn.ie/kingship. In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
Tonight on EWTN Prolife Weekly, an interview with a Catholic mother whose son died by suicide after developing a relationship with an artificial intelligence chatbot. For 10 months, this AI bot sent cryptic messages and even started asking him about suicide. Here is a clip from Megan Garcia's interview with Colin Flynn.
I've heard you say before, Megan, that it was as if you had a predator in your house for 10 months.
That's how it feels. It feels as if there's a stranger, a predator in your home that you don't know about, and they're able to have access to your child and hurt your child in such an awful way. Being able to do the most damage in like almost stealth mode, and nobody realizes it until it's too late. And then as a parent, then you're left with that gaping hole of what happened to my child.
That's tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Check EWTN.com for more air times. You can also read more about the story and the challenges AI is presenting to Catholics in the National Catholic Register, that ncregister.com. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.